A staircase going down always means something. It leads to a room, a passage, a cellar, a crypt, a tunnel, a lower floor, a service level, a storage space, a shelter, or at the very least, a world that was once in use. That's why when you see an old stone staircase descending beneath street level and ending in a wall, the image stays with you longer than other architectural details do. Because a door can sometimes be misread, a window can be misinterpreted, but a staircase is stricter, clearer, more honest. A staircase is evidence of movement. At some point, people were going down there. And that is exactly why one of the most unsettling secrets in old cities is the sealed underground staircase. They do not always appear beneath major monuments. Sometimes they sit on a narrow street, sometimes beside an old church, sometimes in the courtyard of a stone building, sometimes right at the edge of a modern sidewalk, sometimes in the shadow of a tourist landmark where people stop for pictures and never think to look twice. They go down and then they stop. And in that moment, the city admits something it never meant to say out loud. The surface you see now was not always the only surface. Picture this for a second. You are standing on a cold stone street. The walls are old. The facades feel coherent. The windows line up. The arches make sense. The city presents itself as though its story were complete. Then, right where the sidewalk meets the wall, you notice a set of steps. They descend. Maybe 4 steps, maybe 8, maybe 12. But at the bottom there is a wall, sealed, bricked up, silenced. And suddenly, one simple question starts forming in your mind. If these stairs once led somewhere, what is there now? Because a sealed underground staircase is not just an abandoned architectural feature, it is a broken logic, a physical trace of a route that once continued, of a system no longer visible, of a lower level that was once part of real movement. Stairs do not happen by accident. They are measured, proportioned, built to fit the human body, built to arrive somewhere. They may have been sealed later, but the original intention is still sitting there in the stone. Now we have to be honest here. Not every staircase going down is the entrance to some great historical mystery. Some really did lead to cellars, some to storage rooms, some to cool underground spaces where wine was kept, some to water reservoirs, some to service areas, some to nothing more than the building's technical lower level. In old cities, lower floors were much more entangled with daily life than they are now. Storage, trade, supplies, service routes, water systems, heating, even small-scale production could all happen below the main surface. And cities change over time. Street levels rise, fires happen, reconstruction follows, infrastructure gets laid in, fill is added for drainage, new sidewalk layers appear. Entrances that once made perfect sense can gradually end up below the modern grade. So in some cases, the answer really is simple. But that is exactly where the problem begins. Because some staircases do not feel that easy to explain. Some feel too central, too deliberate, too carefully made. Some look like more than back-of-house access. Some are surrounded by stonework that suggests they once belonged to a serious, active route. And some were sealed in ways that do not look like natural decay at all, but like deliberate interruption. Edinburgh is a very good place to begin with that feeling, because Edinburgh is one of those cities where the sense of buried life becomes almost tangible. Most visitors think of it in terms of Gothic towers, black stone facades, dramatic silhouettes, streets that still look medieval. But the moment you start paying attention to what lies below, another order begins to emerge. buried passages, lower closes, vaults, sealed access points, spaces that once belonged to the living city and no longer do. In some parts of the old city, one thing becomes impossible to ignore. The city did not just expand, it also built over itself. And that is an important distinction. Because when a city expands, it adds new districts. But when a city builds over itself, earlier levels are pushed below. And once that happens, a staircase going down may no longer be leading to a simple basement. It may be leading toward an older street level, an older vault system, or a lower urban layer that has been cut off from the living city above. That is what gives sealed staircases in Edinburgh so much weight. Those steps stop feeling like old masonry. They start behaving like the last visible edge of another circulation system under the surface. Paris creates a different feeling, but not a weaker one. Most people hear Paris and think of the catacombs, bone-lined corridors, narrow tunnels, underground maps, darkness and death beneath the city. But the underside of Paris is not only death, it is structural and historical density. Quarries, galleries, old infrastructure routes, layered urban voids, engineering corridors, a buried logic that has never fully disappeared. So when you see a staircase descending below an old building and ending in a wall, it becomes harder to dismiss it as nothing more than storage access. Because in Paris, what lies below almost always feels like part of the city's true body. The more refined the surface looks, the denser the underworld feels beneath it. Imagine a building, a clean stone facade above, a few steps descending below, a rough wall at the bottom. Seen in isolation, you might call that a cellar. But once you know the city below is full of galleries, former quarries, and layered subterranean spaces, the same staircase starts to feel different. The image no longer stands alone, it gains context. And that is the real unease of Paris. The surface feels controlled, the lower world feels thick, and the two never feel completely reconciled. Prague works more quietly, more slowly, but it cuts deeper. Because in Prague's historic center, some of the spaces now sitting below street level are directly tied to earlier city grades. In other words, what looks below to us now may not have been so far below at all. Streets rose, layers were added, a new surface was established. And once you understand that, a sealed staircase changes meaning. Maybe it was not leading underground in the modern sense. Maybe it was descending toward a surface that no longer exists. And that is a powerful idea. By the time we reach Naples, that feeling becomes even heavier. Naples does not relate to its underground like a simple shadow. What lies below feels more like a second city living alongside the first. Subterranean galleries, cisterns, ancient quarry systems, wartime shelters, catacombs, buried roots. Going downward in Naples can feel less like moving between floors and more like moving between worlds. That is why a sealed underground staircase in Naples does not only make you ask, where did it go? It makes you ask, how deep into a larger system was it connected? Because here, the possibility is not just a hidden room, it is a buried network. And that matters. Because a staircase does not always lead to a single chamber. Sometimes it is the last surviving edge of a much larger system that is no longer visible. This is where religious buildings become impossible to ignore. Some of the heaviest examples of sealed staircases appear right around sacred architecture: churches, cathedrals, chapels, monasteries. Historically, stairs going down in these spaces did not only lead to storage, they led to crypts. bone chambers, relics, quiet chapels, restricted sacred zones. In some cases, they descended toward earlier phases of worship, buried foundations, or older sacred arrangements lying beneath the current structure. So in these cases, below is not just a lower floor, it is concentrated meaning. Above, you have the visible main space of worship. Below, you may have an older, heavier, quieter core. That is why sealed staircases in religious buildings feel especially strange. What is being shut off is not merely a room, it is a line of contact with the building's deeper memory. And the issue becomes even sharper once you think about access. Stairs going down were not always for everyone. Who was allowed below? Who was not? Who got to see what? Who was allowed near which remains? In that sense, a staircase does not only divide space, it divides status. So when it is sealed, what disappears is not just a lower room, but a former hierarchy. The same is true in castles and large stone structures. Stairs going down might have led to dungeons, supply chambers, hidden service corridors, siege shelters, escape routes. So when you see a sealed descent in a castle today, it is easy to call it a disused lower section. But those steps may once have been tied to fear, punishment, concealment, protection, survival, or strategy. And once you realize that, the staircase stops being a building detail. It becomes the frozen trace of human behavior. That is why I think it is fair to say this. Sealed staircases are the silenced sentences of a building. And once you see that, the monument changes. Or maybe not the monument, maybe you change. Maybe you stop being satisfied by the surface. Maybe you stop trusting what is immediately visible. Maybe you begin to suspect that every truly great structure has two stories. The story it tells above ground and the story it keeps below. So the next time you stand in front of one of the world's greatest monuments, do not just look up, look down too. Ask what lies beneath the paving. Ask what is under the foundations. Ask what older road, older tomb, older chamber, older belief, older city, older silence might still be there, pressed beneath the monument, but not erased by it. Because maybe some monuments were not built only to rise. Maybe they were also built to hold something down. And if humanity really has spent thousands of years placing its greatest structures on top of buried worlds, then what exactly was down there? And maybe the even stranger question is this: when we stand in awe before history's greatest monuments, are we really responding to the structures themselves? Or are we feeling the gravity of everything buried underneath them?